So I was standing in the toothpaste aisle the other day, just standing there, and there must have been 40 different options: whitening, tartar control, enamel repair, charcoal, mint, spearmint, even bubble gum for some reason.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right, and I realized I'd been staring at these tubes for like a solid 5 minutes, completely paralyzed. I couldn't choose, and it hit me. If I can't even buy toothpaste without a mild existential crisis, how am I supposed to handle the actual big stuff? It just feels like modern life is this relentless high-speed treadmill.
It really does.
But here's the question that led to today's deep dive. Is life actually more complicated than it used to be? Or are we, just the first generation with enough time on our hands to complain about how stressed we are?
It's the ultimate back in my day debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
We look at the past through this very nostalgic sepia-toned lens.
Mm-hmm.
We imagine a slower pace of life and just assume it was easier.
Yeah, simple.
Exactly. But today, we're going to try and strip away that nostalgia and really look at the mechanics of how life has changed. We've got a stack of research here comparing the daily friction of modern life against the lives of our parents and even our grandparents.
Right, and the mission today is to figure out where all this pressure is actually coming from. Is it work, the economy, or is it this supercomputer in my pocket that's screaming for my attention every 30 seconds? Because it feels like I'm doing something wrong, but maybe the game itself has just changed.
The game has definitely changed. And before we dive in, we have to make a really crucial distinction. We need to separate hardship from complexity.
Okay, lay that out for me.
So hardship is physical struggle. It's hunger, it's disease, it's, breaking your back at a coal mine. That's hardship. Complexity is different. Complexity is about the number of variables you have to manage, the number of connections, the number of choices.
Right.
Basically, the cognitive load required just to navigate your day. A life can be physically safe, but still psychologically overwhelming.
That makes so much sense. So my grandfather working a 14-hour shift at a steel mill, that's hardship.
Yes, absolutely.
Me trying to coordinate 3 different calendars while researching the ethical sourcing of my coffee beans, that's complexity.
That is the perfect distillation of it.
Okay.
And to keep this structured, the research we're looking at divides us into 3 cohorts. We've got the grandparents' generation born, say, 1900 to 1930.
Okay.
Then the parents' generation, so boomers and Gen X, roughly 1950 to 1970. And then what we're calling the current generation, millennials and Gen Z, born 1985 to 2005.
So let's start where we spend most of our waking life, work. Because I feel like this is where the complexity creep is just the most aggressive. If you look at the grandparents' era, the data paints a picture of, physical exhaustion, but mental clarity.
Clarity is exactly the right word. For that grandparents' cohort, work was mostly manual and singular. You worked in a factory, on a farm, in a shop. The tasks were repetitive, sure, and often dangerous. But the key metric here is boundedness. Work had hard edges.
The whistle blew.
Exactly. The factory whistle blew and work stopped. You couldn't take it home with you. There were no laptops, no smartphones. Your boss couldn't reach you at the dinner table. You physically left the workspace, and your brain could actually switch off.
Compare that to now, I don't think I've switched off since about 2007.
And that's the big shift. We moved from manual labor to knowledge work. And knowledge work is never really done. There's always another email to answer, another report, another Slack message. The research points to constant connectivity, not just as a nuisance, but as something that fundamentally alters our cortisol levels.
It's the lack of a finish line. I mean, in the gig economy or even just modern corporate life, you can work from anywhere, which means you're kind of expected to work from everywhere. The office is in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading one of the articles that mentioned context switching. It's not just that we work more, it's that we are constantly toggling between being a worker, a parent, a friend, and a consumer every few minutes.
And that carries such a heavy cognitive tax. In the past, you learned to trade. Maybe you were a machinist. You learned how to use a lathe, and that skill was relevant for 40 years.
Right.
Today, we have skill churn. The software you use today will be obsolete in 3 years. So you're constantly in a state of being a novice, constantly relearning how to do your own job. That creates this background hum of anxiety. Am I falling behind? That your grandfather just didn't have.
And that anxiety doesn't stop at the office door. It follows us home. And this is where I want to talk about shadow work, because we have all these gadgets that are supposed to save us time, but I feel like I spend half my life just managing the gadgets.
Shadow work is a fascinating concept.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the unpaid labor we do now that used to be done by someone else or didn't exist at all.
Yeah.
Think about the grandparents' own. Appliances were dumb. You
Yes,
didn't need
exactly.
firmware updates. You didn't need to manage a subscription for your doorbell.
My grandmother never had to reset her router. She never had to spend 3 hours on hold with an airline because now we are the travel agents. We scan our own groceries, we pump our own gas, we're our own bank tellers through an app.
We have basically outsourced the labor of service roles directly to the consumer. But it goes deeper. The parents' generation had the TV and the microwave. Those were conveniences. We have the smart home, which is really just a complex IT network that you are now personally responsible for maintaining.
And if the internet goes down, the house just stops working.
Right. We've traded the physical labor of, scrubbing clothes on a washboard for the mental labor of managing digital infrastructure. It's just admin. Life has become 40% administration.
And it's so sneaky because it doesn't look like work. It just looks like you're staring at your phone.
But your brain is burning glucose, processing troubleshooting steps, managing passwords, curating subscriptions.
Speaking of burning glucose, we have to talk about information. The whole decision fatigue thing that started with my toothpaste meltdown.
This is one of the most chemically distinct differences between the generations. For our grandparents, information was scarce. You got the news once a day. If you wanted to know something, you had to go to a library or find an expert.
Ignorance was a little bit of bliss, or at least it was quiet.
It was certainly quieter. Now we're in an information avalanche. But the problem isn't just the volume. It's the paradox of choice. There's a biological mechanism at play here called ego depletion.
That sounds intense. What is it?
Well, think of your willpower and your decision-making ability like a battery. Every single choice you make drains a little bit of that charge. Not just big choices, every choice.
Which socks to wear?
Drain. Read this notification or swipe it away. Drain. Which of the 50 toothpaste to buy? Big drain.
So by the time I actually get to the important stuff like, should I take this new job or how do I handle this conflict, my battery is completely dead.
Precisely. You're operating on fumes. And the modern environment is engineered to force thousands of these micro decisions on you every single day. Our grandparents simply didn't burn energy on this stuff. There were 3 TV channels. There were 2 kinds of bread. They saved their executive function for things that actually mattered.
And on top of all the decisions, we have the job of being our own editor. Because back then, if it was on the news, it was generally, well, at least professionally vetted. Now I see a headline and my immediate reaction is this real? Is this AI? Is this propaganda? I have to fact check reality in real time.
That is a massive cognitive load. Navigating misinformation requires constant critical thinking, which is high-energy brain work. We're all acting as editor-in-chief of our own personal news feeds 24/7.
Let's shift gears to the stuff that keeps us up at night. Money and status. Because there's this narrative that we're soft, and that if we just stopped buying avocado toast, we'd all own 3 houses. But the economic data in this stack tells a very, very different story.
The numbers are stark. I mean, if you look at the purchasing power of the grandparents' generation, especially post-World War II, a single income could often support a family, buy a home, and save for retirement. The ratio of housing cost to income was just significantly lower.
That's the whole American dream archetype, right? You follow the rules, you get the house.
And by the parents' generation, that started to shift. You saw the rise of the dual-income household, partly due to positive social changes, like more women entering the workforce. But eventually, it just became an economic necessity.
And for us, the current generation.
For us, the correlation has broken. High housing costs, stagnating wages relative to inflation, and the introduction of massive student loan debt. The entry fee for middle-class life has just skyrocketed. So you get this high-pressure hustle culture, not because people love working 3 side gigs, but because the math demands it.
It's the gig economy trap again. It's framed as freedom, but really it's just instability. And then you layer the social aspect on top of all that. We aren't just trying to survive economically, we're trying to survive socially in a way that feels completely new.
Right, this is the identity expectation. In the grandparents' era, social roles were rigid. You were a father, a mother, a blacksmith, a churchgoer. The script was more or less written for you.
Which was stifling, let's be honest. If you didn't fit the script, you were an outcast.
Absolutely. It was incredibly restrictive. But, and here's the complexity paradox again, it was simple. You didn't have to invent yourself from scratch. Today, identity is fluid. You can be anything. You can live anywhere. You can reinvent your career at 40.
But the flip side of you can be anything is this immense pressure that you must be something amazing.
Yes. The burden of authorship is on you. You have to write your own script, cast your own life, and then, thanks to social media, market it to the world. We're constantly auditioning for our peer group.
The highlight reel effect. I'm sitting in my messy apartment on a Friday night, looking at Instagram where everyone else seems to be on a yacht in Greece. It creates this comparative suffering.
And that comparison is global now. Your grandmother compared herself to the neighbors on her street. You are comparing yourself to the top 1% of the entire planet's most curated lives. That's a recipe for chronic inadequacy.
Okay, I'm listening to us talk, and I feel like I need a drink. It sounds awful. We're exhausted, broke, and anxious. But we have to be intellectually honest. Is it all bad? I mean, I certainly don't want to go back to an era where a paper cut could kill me.
And that is the necessary counterargument. We can't ignore the simplifiers. And the most obvious one is health. The grandparents' generation lived with the constant background threat of mortality that we can barely even imagine.
Polio, tuberculosis, simple infections.
Exactly. We have vaccines, antibiotics, MRI machines. We've basically traded the complexity of survival for the complexity of maintenance. We live longer, which means we have decades more to manage chronic conditions, but we are living.
And convenience. I mean, look at logistics. If my grandfather wanted to visit a friend in another city, that was a whole operation. Maps, planning, maybe sending a telegram. I can video call anyone on Earth instantly for free. I can summon a car to my door in 3 minutes.
The friction of the physical world has almost vanished. But notice what happens when that friction disappears. Our expectations just skyrocket. If the car takes 7 minutes instead of 3, you get annoyed. If the video call buffers, you get frustrated. We become intolerant of the slightest delay.
That is such a good point. We removed the wait times, but we just filled that time with more tasks. We didn't take the save time and use it to rest. We used it to do more.
That's the Jevons paradox of time management. The more efficient we become at using our time, the more crammed our schedules become.
So we've looked at the work, the home, the money, the tech. What's the verdict? Is life actually more complex?
If you look at the aggregate of all this data, the answer is a nuanced yes, but is a very specific kind of complexity. We have traded physical complexity for cognitive complexity.
We traded muscle for brain.
We traded calluses on our hands for anxiety in our minds. We aren't fighting the elements anymore. We're fighting the algorithm, the economy, and the sheer volume of choice. The world is safer, but it is much, much louder.
Okay, so if the problem is that it's louder, how do we turn down the volume? The source material had this sort of survival guide, and I want to stress test these because the first one is set digital boundaries. And honestly, that feels like advice from someone who doesn't have a demanding boss.
It is the hardest one to implement, but the research argues it's the most critical.
Yeah.
You're right, you can't just ignore your boss. But boundaries doesn't mean disappearing. It means carving out sacred zones.
Okay.
Maybe the bedroom is a no-phone zone. Maybe the dinner table is. You have to create physical spaces where the digital world simply cannot follow you.
So it's not about being offline for a week. It's about microdoses of silence.
Correct. You need to give your brain a chance to recharge that decision battery we talked about. If you're scrolling in bed, you're waking up already depleted.
The next tip was prioritize decisions. This goes right back to the toothpaste.
This is all about automation. Steve Jobs wearing the same black turtleneck wasn't a fashion statement. It was a complexity reduction strategy. He just didn't want to waste energy deciding what to wear.
So, meal planning, automating bill payments, buying the same brand of detergent every single time.
Yes. Make the dumb decisions once so they stay made. Save your brain for the things that actually require your intelligence.
I like that. Make the decision once. The third one is financial habits, which feels heavy, but the stack focuses on knowledge as an anxiety reducer.
Financial anxiety thrives in the dark. The more complex the economy gets, the more you need to understand the mechanics. It's not just save money. It's understanding how your loans work, how interest rates affect you. Complexity is just less scary when it's transparent.
And then there's focused learning to deal with that skill churn thing.
This is crucial. Don't try to learn everything. You don't need to know how to code A&D, bake sourdough, A&E, speak Mandarin all this month. Pick one lane. A just-in-time learning approach is so much better than trying to hoard knowledge you might never use.
Stop trying to be the Renaissance person of 2024. Just learn what you need for the next step.
Exactly. Reduce the pressure to be optimized.
And finally, seek community. And they don't mean a Facebook group.
No. They mean analog, messy, face-to-face interaction. The research is clear. A digital connection does not release the same oxytocin as physical presence. You need to see eyes, hear voices, shake hands. It grounds you in the physical world, which is a great antidote to all this digital abstract stress.
It's the one thing our grandparents had that we've really lost. Their default setting was being together. Our default setting is being alone together.
And we have to consciously fight to get that back.
You know, this whole deep dive has been validating. I think that's the word. It's validating to know that the overwhelm isn't just a personal failure. The world really is demanding more of our processing power than ever before.
It is. But I want to leave you with a thought that kind of flips this slightly. We've been talking about complexity as a burden, but complexity is often just the shadow of abundance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the reason the cereal aisle is overwhelming is that we have food. The reason career choices are paralyzing is that we have choices. We aren't conscripted into the local mind at age 12. We're drowning in options, yes, but that means we are swimming in possibility.
That is a beautiful and terrifying way to look at it. We're carrying the weight of freedom.
Exactly.
So here's my challenge to you listening right now. Look at your life. Where are you optimizing for more information, more speed, more options? And where could you maybe trade a little bit of that abundance for just a little bit of peace? Maybe the best choice isn't the one with the most features. Maybe it's just the one that lets you sleep at night. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Please feel free to click on the link in the description below to discover more podcasts.